Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask an Architect. Here we are at the ACSA Administrators Conference for a special Academy edition. Today on the show we have Dennis Andrejko. Dennis, can we get a quick second bio, who you are and what you're doing right now?
Thanks, Nick. I'm happy to be here. As I said, I'm Dennis Andrejko. I'm the head of the Department of Architecture at Rochester Institute of Technology and the Golisano Institute for Sustainability. I've been in practice as well as in the academy for 25, 30 years and have been excited about always looking at new ways of exploring better built environments.
Great. Thanks, Dennis. I want to kind of go full circle and touch on all the things you've been working on throughout your career. You have an extensive professional background, you have an extensive academic background, and I noticed that you also have some work with sustainability, particularly your Costa Rica initiative is really interesting. So I'd like to touch on all of those along the way this morning if we could. First, professionally, you have a laundry list of projects you've worked on in quite a few different building types. Can you talk a little bit about overall the kind of work you've done and your mentality and philosophy in design in terms of practice?
Sure. I got interested in architecture, but more in a focused way. Architecture as it relates to site, client, climate, and context. When I was a student at Arizona State University, looking at the way buildings are a part of the site and the site or the landscape is a part of the building, this inextricable relationship between building and environment and building. And getting out of school, I started to focus on that in more detail, and we started a practice after I did my graduate work in Boston, in Northern California, that really had a keen focus on utilizing solar energy in buildings, passive solar utilization, so the building becomes the energy system, if you will. And that evolved through my career, through publications and presentations and workshops, to always try to stay focused on that relationship among those four variables: site, climate, client, context, and the value and meaning ultimately for the user to improve her or his well-being in everyday life.
What would you say are some of the most innovative projects you've worked on in terms of sustainability? And you talked about climate a lot, and I know that's a big focus of a lot of your work. What are some of the most impactful or innovative projects specifically that you've worked on over the years?
Well, in my practice, we've done a lot of projects, as I alluded to earlier, about incorporating solar energy as a renewable energy resource. We've done projects in over 20 states, so looking at that viable opportunity to include renewable energy in design is very, very important. But really working toward what even the AIA has today of Architecture 2030 and carbon neutral buildings and the like. We have a tremendous opportunity and responsibility ahead of us to really look at high performance buildings, but also some of the initiatives recently have been engaging our students as well as the practitioners in service or engagement in terms of scholarship into communities. So I've done a number of SDAT, Sustainable Design Assessment teams, where we've gone into communities and we've looked at working with stakeholders and those public folks that want to look at ways of improving their future around livability, sustainability, resiliency. And so I think an architect's responsibility is not just on the built environment, but how the built environment is harmonized into the community as a whole. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, one of the things we try to focus on in this show is highlighting the career options within architecture that students can pursue dependent upon their interests. You mentioned, it sounds like a little bit of sustainability consulting. Is that something that you've done before in terms of, you said going into a community and identifying opportunities. Is that something that's been part of your career path, or can you expand upon consulting for sustainability?
Sure. I'll mention two things. One, it has been in my practice, not only for our own projects that we do, but also being brought into larger teams to bring that focus area or that specialty to look at ways that buildings can become more efficient, more high-performing. But again, I want to emphasize this notion about buildings improving the everyday lives of the occupants. But even in our program at Rochester Institute of Technology, I should say that it's in the Golisano Institute for Sustainability. It's a very unique program. So it takes this notion of sustainability and adds to the pellet or our toolbox to make future leaders, our students that will go into the profession, more equipped to look at adding value to design, not just another ingredient, but enhancing the value of design overall. So they can bring it into their practices, but they can also have that special voice, that important voice, that significant voice to elevate the value of our everyday lives.
And how did this all work into your initiative in Costa Rica? Is that what you were just mentioning at Rochester? Is that part of it?
Actually, the Costa Rica initiative, you've done a little homework here.
A little bit.
Yeah. The Costa Rica initiative on sustainable futures came from many years with my involvement at the University at Buffalo prior to launching this new program at RIT. But sustainable futures and a few other things, again, brings together with Costa Rica, for example, the Monte Verde region in the rainforest and the cloud forest, and looking at that region and that zone as very, very rich ecologically. But Costa Rica also has a couple of things. One, it relies heavily on tourism and ecotourism, and they also they claim to be one of the countries, they want to be the first carbon neutral country in the world. So for us to come in and look at how that region wants to maintain its value, its ecological presence and identity, but also bring in a bunch of people. How do you reconcile those sorts of things? So the Sustainable Futures program there allows our students to blend and mix not only with architecture, but with landscape architecture students, with planning students. And that Monteverde Institute has other professions, the medical profession, biologists that come in. So it really brings in a lot of different disciplines to look at a very, very unique area of the world and how we can, as human beings, be a part of rather than apart from the natural environment.
Yeah, it seems like a huge catch-22 and a great challenge to have an area of the country, of the world like that that's so focused on, like you said, eco-tourism and highlighting their natural environment, but yet promoting growth and development and an increase in people into the country. So I imagine that's a constant challenge, and it's probably a great little petri dish of experimentation in terms of new tools and practices and approaches to managing those two challenging, aspects.
The petri dish, I think, is a good way of looking at it, and I think in the profession as a whole, we're always looking at new and innovative ways to test, to experiment. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is realize that we're not isolated from other disciplines and other professions. We're not isolated from those aspects of the global condition overall, aspects of other species, the idea of looking at ways that we are going to need to be focused on in terms of our own survival. I mean, we can talk about climate change, we can talk about energy consumption, we can talk about a lot of different things, but another very, very important thing, which architects, I think, have a tremendous opportunity around and responsibility toward, is how we design and build buildings within the context of the larger environment that ultimately has to do with our health and our well-being. And there is a lot of effort today that explores this notion of the relationship between the built environment and the healthiness of individuals. One of the biggest things I think personally for tomorrow that we're going to be struggling and challenged with is healthcare and healthcare costs. And if we can validate, if we can validate that better environments, better designs actually make us healthier people, we can look at ways that show that buildings can reduce the reliance on healthcare costs and those sorts of things.
So you mentioned being able to prove that there's a direct correlation there. Is there any research that you're involved in or at Rochester Institute of Technology that's helping to prove that there is, some evidence to that design strategy?
Good point. Actually, we're trying to put an initiative together right now that brings together some of the health programs on our campus into the Golisano Institute for Sustainability and other campuses in the region that have health programs, but also the health industry, health organizations and the like, to have a conversation amongst disciplines that will allow us to collaborate and negotiate and then validate with metrics how buildings and how we can show the performance of buildings assisting in that way. There have been some studies around daylighting and test scores and sick days off and those kinds of things, but we're trying to ratchet that up even more so about just broadly and specifically the benefit of health and design.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that interdisciplinary element of what the approach you guys are taking, because that seems to be more and more important as we research design and research how design can impact the public as a whole. And it's not just our thoughts as designers and architects, but what are the thoughts from the professionals out there in the health industry or in the sciences or just the workplace environment as a whole? Are we getting that data and creating interdisciplinary teams to help inform our designs?
To close, I just want to say when I was very young in 8th grade, I wanted to be a doctor, speaking of health. And then I got into the architectural interest early on as well, and thus it's become my career. But I know I know a number of physicians. I've worked with them and designed buildings for them and the like, but there's one in particular that always wanted to be an architect. But he made the point, he said, architects are the doctors of the environment. And I think that's very, very good. We have a tremendous responsibility to improve that healthiness of the environment overall. And this inextricable relationship between buildings and the environment and the impact that we make every day to that environment will lead us on a better path or lead us on a more questionable path. So we are the doctors. Architects are the doctors of the environment.
I love that description. I think that's a fantastic way to look at things. And Dennis, I was going to ask you if there was a moment personally early on in your life that led you down this path towards sustainability and looking at buildings as affecting the health of humankind. Is that the kind of background that really led you down this path? Your interest in medicine early on, is that the personal moment where you decided that a focus on sustainability was really important to you personally as you grew into the profession? Or was there something else as well?
That in part, but I think early on in my career, sustainability wasn't a word back then, but this relationship of us as human beings as a part of the broader element of species in the earth overall, notion of ecology, notion of sensitivity to environmental issues and the like, excuse me, sensitivity to ecological issues and all. I've always been one of thinking about nature, again, as I mentioned earlier, a part of nature rather than apart from it. And I've always been concerned about us as human beings, as a species, as not the supreme species, but a species amongst many others. So,
I love that. Thanks, Dennis. I'd be remiss if we didn't take a moment to highlight Rochester Institute of Technology and some of the great things that are happening there. And some of our students who are out there right now are looking at this. They're either high school students looking at college or undergrads looking at grad school. Why should people consider Rochester Institute of Technology for their architecture studies?
It's a great place. Western New York is wonderful. It's the city is a city that encourages a lot of human interaction. But RIT, and specifically the Golisano Institute for Sustainability, infuses that notion of what sustainability is from a technical perspective, from an environmental perspective, from a social perspective, and how one as a designer and aspiring designer needs to be aware of and equipped around those various facets. It's a technological school, but it's a part of the broader spectrum. And our program, aligned with a Master of Science and a PhD in sustainability, allows us to intermix and weave together with those that are not interested in a degree in architecture, but are interested in the same journey toward a sustainable future. And so that makes our program very unique to be housed in the Golisano Institute for Sustainability and to collaborate and integrate, with other folks that will go on and do other things more technically or specifically, not necessarily about architecture, but that being a part of the overall agenda.
Fantastic. So if you're interested in Rochester Institute of Technology, please check them out. Natalie, if we could link up the hyperlink to the school right here, and hopefully people will go and give RIT a look. Dennis, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show today, and we'll see you next time on the next edition of Ask an Architect.